Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody. Today we have a deck tech on Borborygmos and Fblthp as they won our poll over on TikTok. We only received one request to get an additional deck list out there for a $400 budget deck list. So today we'll be going over Borborygmos itself, the deck strategy, as well as a deck at a reasonable budget down at about $50, and then as requested at $400. Before we get into this, if you like what you see here, please like and subscribe. If you see something that we could have added, or if you have a commander that you want to see built, feel free to let us know in the comments down below. So let's get into it. So, Borborygmos and Fblthp. He is a 2 generic green, blue, and red commander. He's a 6/5 Cyclops Homunculus. Now, when he enters or attacks, we get a very interesting effect. We get to draw a card and then discard any number of lands. So, we're going to be playing a lands deck first and foremost. He also does have a bit of protection for himself, since for 1 and a blue, he can put himself third from the top of our library. So this will be helpful to protect him, since we're going to have a lot of deck thinning and extra draw. And we'll be able to hopefully not have to pay commander tax for him. So let's get into that $50 deck. So this deck is going to cost us about $33.55, $38.43, including the basics. Now, this is looking at TCG Player. If you look over at Card Kingdom, it's going to be a little bit more. I'm not sure what it is over on Cool Stuff Inc., but for our deck reasonings, it is going to be within the $50 budget. So, starting off, we're going to look at the main piece of the deck, our lands. It's going to be 40 lands, 37 basic lands, and then we've got an Evolving Wilds, a Terramorphic Expanse, and a Myriad Landscape. So we're sitting really high on lands in comparison to other decks that we'll build for 2 reasons. One, we want to have as many basics as we can so we can grab them. We have a lot of cards that are going to say, search your library for a basic land card and then do X. We want to be able to capitalize on that, and hopefully with one of our cards that we'll go over a little bit later in this, be able to grab a lot of our lands out of our deck and be able to pitch them immediately to deal massive damage. Secondarily, most of our cards based out of our creatures, out of our enchantments, they're going to have landfall. Several cards are going to want us to have cards leave our hands, and the first card we're going to go over is going to be the one and only Planeswalker in the deck. So that's going to be Koth, Fire of Resistance. Now, Koth we can get out super early, and if we play our cards right, we don't have a really pressing board state, we might be able to ult him as soon as turn 5. So Koth is a 2 generic and 2 red Planeswalker that'll come in with 4 loyalty. We get to +2 him to search our library for a basic mountain card, reveal it, put it into our hand, then shuffle. His second ability we're not really going to use. It's -3 for dealing damage equal to the number of mountains you control. That's not really going to be directly effective. You know, it's okay, we might be able to get 3 damage off, we might be able to get 4 damage off, but it's a worst case scenario. We can -3, maybe get rid of something. The thing that we're actually aiming for here is going to be his ult. That is going to be our saving grace for one of our best win cons, because it is an emblem. For -7, we get to have, whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, this emblem deals 4 damage to any target. So that is a miniature Valakut, but it can't be removed except for by player removal or resetting the game entirely. That's going to be huge because we do have 14 mountains in here. So every time that we play a mountain, we can either deal 4 damage to a creature, deal 4 damage to somebody's face. We are going to get a lot more board control with that, and again, we can get that super early on, so we might be able to really take over the game, even with this really budget deck. Now, Koth seems great. It's a 4-cost commander, or 4-cost... Now, Koth seems great. He is a 4-cost planeswalker. He's got a really strong ultimate. He's going to thin our deck, grabbing our mountains right out from it. But how do we protect him? We're going to have a planeswalker that's immediately going to put a target on his back. How do we protect this? We are going to be looking at our creatures and enchantments for this. So, looking at the bottom of our curve, first and foremost, skipping over Groundskeeper, because that's going to be a really late game card, because we're not really going to be needing to return basics that early, but later in the game we might want to restock our hand and might have an overt amount of expendable mana to do so. But first, our Brushfire Elemental. A red and a green 1/1 haste elemental. It can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Cool. But it's a 1/1. Who cares? Well, we are a lands deck. That's who cares. So, that every time that we play a land, he's going to get +2/+2. So, we play a Terramorphic Expanse, crack it, go get a land, he is a 5/5 for that turn. We play a regular land, he's a 3/3. We can start doing some not inconsequential amounts of damage to whoever we want pretty quickly if we wanted to. We're going to be kind of on the aggro gameplay across the board here in the deck, so that's what we're going to be looking at doing. Now, popping up into the 3s, we have a couple of our more important pieces, such as Aranis the Gloomstalker, 3-drop, 3/3 Death Toucher, that whenever she attacks, return target land from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, a land-specific Sun Titan. This means that we can swing with her, swing with Bushfire Elemental, just for an example, and get multiple landfall triggers off of that, even. Because notice, it does say return target land from your graveyard to the battlefield. It doesn't say tapped. So, we could swing with Aranis and Brushfire after we've already done that Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wild cycle, and then do it again, getting all the way up to 7 or even 9 damage on that swing. Next one we want to go over is Riel the Everwise. Riel is a 3-drop, 0/3 that gets +1 in the front for each instant and sorcery in our graveyard. Now that does seem pretty good. We do have 18 instants or sorceries, so she could get pretty big, but we're caring more about her second line of text, which says whenever you discard 1 or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So if we play her and then send out Borborygmos, immediately pitch 4 lands, we're drawing 4 cards back. So she is making it so while we are discarding our hand, we're not going into top deck mode. We are not ever going to see that, oh my goodness, I have 1 card in hand and I am just depending on whatever is on top of my library. We're not going to see that with Riel out. The last card that is in our 3s that's a super big powerhouse for us is going to be Slogurk the Overslime. So Slogurk is a 3/3 trample ooze that says whenever a land enters or goes into the graveyard from anywhere. So if we discard it, if somebody's playing a mill strategy, if someone's playing land destruction, if it goes into our graveyard from anywhere, we get a 1/1 counter on Slogurk. He does protect himself as well. So I can remove 3 counters from Slogurk to immediately put him back in our hand. But if we do that, or if he is removed in any other way, he puts 3 lands from our graveyard to our hand. So in a very terrible case scenario, we're restocking our hand with ammunition for several of our other cards, as well as, if we really need to, we can put Slogurk back into our hand, replay him, and start pumping that Trampler back up. Some other notable cards in our 3 are going to be Tunneling Geopede, which Tunneling Geopede, whenever a land enters the battlefield, we deal 1 damage to each opponent, so that's, again, some more residual damage. Tago, Goblin Weaponsmith, that makes rocks. Those rocks are equipments that we can put onto any creature, tap them, sacrifice the rock, and deal 2 damage to any target. And Undergrowth Champion. This is a really sticky 2/2 for 3 elemental that says if damage would be dealt to him, we can remove a 1/1 counter instead of him dying. So Blasphemous Acts, Mizzium Mortars, things that deal damage across the board, we can at least keep him. And how do we get the 1/1 counters? We just play lands. We get a 1/1 counter on him anytime that a land enters the battlefield under our control. Now, popping up to our 4s. We have a little bit of redundancy, which we're going to like in this deck. We have Kosai's Ravager and Spitfire Lagak. The Kosai's Ravager is kind of like Tunneling Geopede, which it is a 2/2 for 4, that whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we can deal 1 damage to target player. Spitfire Lagak is a 1-for-1 exact same as Tunneling Geopede. It is a 3/4 instead of a 3/2, and it is a 4 cost that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we deal damage to each opponent. So we're going to have that redundancy. We can be shocking or even bolting some players each turn if we're making our land drops. Now, our best 4, the biggest 4 that we've got here, is going to be our Surly Badgersaur. He is going to be a great powerhouse because he gives us effects whenever we discard. So whenever we discard a creature card, we put a 1/1 counter on him. Whenever we discard a non-creature, non-land card, he gets to fight something. But the biggest piece is whenever we discard a land card, we're getting treasures. So we aren't missing out on that potential mana. We are even netting mana in some situations. We discard 5 lands with Borborygmos, we get 5 treasures. If we bring those back to our hand and start playing them, we're going to just keep netting more mana. So he's going to be a great staple. Again, I'm going to be saying that a lot. We are going to have a lot of really powerful cards even at this budget. At our 5, it's pretty straightforward. We have a Brash Taunter in here. Brash Taunter says 1/1 indestructible. Whenever he is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. Alright, we don't have any creatures to blow our Cyclops' damage at. Let's blow it at Brash Taunter because he can redirect that directly at our opponent's face. So instead of us dealing 10 damage to a creature, we deal 10 damage to Brash Taunter that punches them in the face for 10. Straightforward to the point. Akum Hellkite. This is another redundancy put in. So it is a 6-drop 4/4 that whenever a land enters the battlefield, we're dealing 1 damage to any target. But if it's a land, we get to do 2 damage instead. Or a mountain, we get to do 2 damage instead. So that 2 or 3 that I was talking about earlier, that can be 4 or 5 damage at a time, anytime that we play a land. We're going to skip over Woodcrasher. He's just a big for big, and he gets bigger with landfall. Geode Rager is going to be a huge piece, though. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, goad each creature target player controls with a first strike 4/3. So, we play a Geode Rager, we play a land, and target player can't attack us next turn. That is essentially what this card reads. Because goad means it has to, all creatures have to attack if able, and they cannot attack you. So that guy who's staring you down with a big board state, we can force him to tap out, swing at somebody else, and we get another turn. Phylath and Rampaging Baloths are going to be doing the exact same thing. And again, these are going to be why we have so many basics. So, Rampaging Baloths first, because quick, easy, to the point, whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we get a 4/4. So, it's a 6/6 that makes us 4/4s anytime lands enter the battlefield. But, Phylath. Phylath is the one that we're going to get a little bit complicated with. So, he is a 5/5 for 6. But when he enters the battlefield, we create a 0/1 plant creature for each basic land we control. again, we have 37 basic lands. So we could get, if we played every land that we have, which obviously for a couple of reasons we should not, we get a lot of 0/1s. That can be blockers, or if we continue to make landfall triggers, we get to put 4 1/1 counters on target plant we control. So we can start putting 1/1 counters on those plants, and those plants can turn from 0/1s to 4/5s, 8/9s, etc. So we can infinitely grow them as well. Now, our 7 and our 8, which our mana curve is mostly 3s. If we come down here, we do see that it's an average of 3 and 1/3. But we do have 2 really high top-end cards here in our creatures. First one, incidentally, we do have a lot of elementals. So, Omnath, Locus of Rage. He is a 7-drop 5/5. That whenever a land enters the battlefield, we get a 5/5 red and green elemental onto the battlefield. That's a pretty big guy, but even if we don't get to swing at anybody with them, say if somebody board wipes, we get, whenever Omnath, Locus of Rage, or another elemental we control dies, we bolt target creature or player. So, in the worst case scenario, we are dealing multiple instances of 3 damage to somebody if a board wipe happens. And finally, in our creatures, Borborygmos Enraged. He is a 7/6 trampler for 8. That whenever he deals combat damage to a player, we're going to reveal the top 3 cards, put all lands revealed this way into our hand, and then the rest into our graveyard. That's great. We're going to be getting more lands into our hand, but the best part, the most important part, is going to be that last line. Discard a land card. Borborygmos deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So we are going to be able to start slinging our lands at their face for lightning bolt damage. Now let's get into our enchantments. Tectonic Reformation, pretty straightforward. Worst case scenario, this is a card that we can pitch for 2. We can have Surly Badgersaur fight, or if he's not out, we can draw 2 cards with Riel. If she's not out, we just get to get rid of a potentially dead card for 2 mana and draw. Otherwise, each land card in our hand gives us cycling. So if we've got a lot of lands and none of our finishers, we can start cycling them away for 1 red apiece. Next one here, it's the, I'll say, second half of Colony Heart Expedition. We have Zektar Shrine Expedition. It is a 1 red enchantment that says whenever a land enters battlefield under your control, you may put a quest counter on it. Removing 3 quest counters, so after playing 3 lands, we get a 7/1 lightning elemental, pretty much. So it's a 7/1 red elemental with trample and haste that exiles itself at the beginning of the next end step. We sacrifice Zektar Shrine Expedition. So, just for playing lands, we get 7 damage dealt to somebody pretty quickly. We do play Retreat to Valakut and Retreat to Kazandu. These cards are going to make our board huge, such as target creature gets +2 in the front until end of turn, and put a 1/1 counter on target creature. We can sustain ourselves a little bit and gain 2 life per landfall entering, or we can get in for big damage and say target creature cannot block this turn. These are all going to be great effects for our deck, since we are going to be definitely swinging in on a regular basis. Now, back to our redundancy plan here. Seismic Assault, triple red, discard a land card. Seismic Assault deals 2 damage to any target. So, if we can't do the Borborygmos plan, we can start using Seismic Assault. We can start pitching lands to Seismic Assault to deal 2 damage up top. Wilderness Reclamation, that allows us to play on their turn. On our end step, we get to untap all lands we control. So if we want to, say, play one of our cards on their turn, we can. If we want to put Borborygmos back into our deck to avoid a board wipe, we can. We got a lot of options with Wilderness Reclamation, and it keeps them guessing on what we're trying to do. And finally, Zendikar's Royal. Whenever a land enters battlefield, we're going to make a 2/2 elemental. Again, paired with Omnath, we're going to have a lot of elementals coming in and a lot of elementals dying. So we are going to be getting all sorts of damage there. We are running a single battle with Invasion of Kaldheim. Now, Invasion of Kaldheim. It is a 4-cost, 4-defense siege. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to exile our hand, draw that many cards, and then until the end of our next turn, so we get a whole turn cycle, we can play cards exiled that way. So we get to impulse our hand, draw new cards, and in a lot of cases, net positive, right? We're drawing, 3-4 extra cards, being able to still play the 3 or 4 cards that we had in hand beforehand, and we get a thing to attack. And if we attack and kill this, or if this dies, we get Pirate of the World Tree. Discarding a land card to Pirate of the World Tree will allow us to deal 2 damage to any target, and whenever we discard a land card, we get to impulse. So we get to exile the top card of our library, and we can play that card this turn. So that's going to be huge. We're going to be discarding cards, or we're going to be discarding land cards anyways. So we're going to be able to start netting a lot more. That's going to go really well with our Sprouting Vines, which we'll go over here in just a moment. Now, before we get into our instants and sorceries, let's just talk about our artifacts. We have a basic package here. We have Soul Ring, all of our guild signets, but our 2 pieces in here that are kind of interesting are going to be Elixir of Immortality first and foremost, because it's a 1-cost artifact. Great. We got a really good low curve artifact. If we play this, and let's say we are burning through our deck, we are just playing our hearts out, we don't have a lot of cards left in our library, we can crack this, put shuffle it and our graveyard into our library. So we gain 5 life, we refill our deck, and we can redo this cycle again if we really need to, because Elixir will be shuffled back in as well. The other one is Adventuring Gear. Pretty simple on why we're putting this in here. It is a 1-cost, equip for 1, gives another creature +2/+2 landfall. So if we put that on Brushfire Elemental, he's immediately getting massive. Pretty simple. Now, instants and sorceries. So we got some really cool stuff here. I'll go over the easy pieces first. So we've got our Crop Rotation, Growth Spiral, Harrow, and You Happen Upon a Glade. Crop Rotation, Harrow, Growth Spiral, these are all going to get us lands. Happen Upon a Glade, that gets us 2 basic lands, putting them into our hand. The Harrow puts them into play, Crop Rotation puts them into play, Growth Spiral lets us play an additional land and draw a card. So, You Happen Upon a Glade, we get to put 2 lands in our hand, that's good fodder for later, or we can return target permanent from our graveyard to our hand. So if, say, our Seismic Assault or our battle gets removed and we want to get that back, we can grab it back and try again next turn, right? Then we also have Snap, Arcbond, and Chaos War. Snap, really simple. 2 mana, return target creature to its owner's hand. We are going to untap 2 lands. Arcbond, that's going to go really well with our commander. Arcbond says, whenever target creature is dealt damage this turn, it deals that much damage to each other creature and each player. So, let's say we're sending 10 at our Brashed Honor. We could use that as a board wipe and deal an additional 10 to each player. Or, let's see a Blasphemous Act. Okay, we're dealing 13 to each creature. I will say we'll deal 13 to each creature twice and 13 to each player. You get to get a little bit of a modal surge here with Archbond. And again, our commander can really abuse that, seeing as we can send damage to a creature and hit everybody with that. That's a win for us. And Chaos Warp, this is just a perfect removal spell. We remove any target, and they get to get something off the top, but if their win con's on the bottom of their library, then who cares, right? Now, two pieces here that are kind of big win cons here. This, first off, is going to be Sprouting Vines. Sprouting Vines, accompanied with all of our other land grab spells or just playing a lot of things in one turn, is going to be huge, because Sprouting Vines is a 3-cost storm spell that says whenever you cast a spell, you're adding to the storm count. When you cast Sprouting Vines, for each spell you've cast this turn before this spell, we get to copy it. So, Sprouting Vines with a storm count of, say, 3, we will be able to search our library for a basic land card 4 times, reveal it, put it into our hand, shuffle our library. With that, we're going to be pairing that with Lightning Storm. This is going to be one of our big finishers, because Lightning Storm is a 3-cost red instant that says it deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is 3 plus the number of charge counters on it. How do we get charge counters on Lightning Storm, you may ask? We're discarding land cards. For each land that we discard, we get to put 2 charge counters on Lightning Storm. So using that prior example there, Sprouting Vines for a storm count of 4, grabbing 4 basic lands, we discard all of those. We're dealing 11 damage to any target with Lightning Storm. Any player can also pay this ability. So if somebody really wants to help you, or you want to politic with somebody and say, hey, this person kills us next turn if we don't do something, do you want to pitch some lands to this? You can get a little bit more damage in and really seal the deal with killing somebody. Now, our sorceries. We have some pretty simple, basic things here. Mathematic Insight, we get to pitch a land card, draw 2 cards. Really simple, a slightly worse Faithless Looting, but we're going to have an excess of lands anyways. Explore, Rampant Growth, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach. These all get us lands either into play or into our hands, or both. The Rites of Spring is a really interesting card that I found when building this deck. We can discard any number of cards from our hand, search our library for that many basics, and put those into our hand. Again, we've got 37 basics. So we can pitch 3 or 4 cards, go grab 3 or 4 basics. We can use that into our Lightning Storm. We can use that into, we just need lands, and we're seeing all of our finishers, but we're not seeing our lands. We have such versatility with it. It's going to be great. And with that being said, we also have Nylea's Intervention for that, which we have a modal with this. We can either deal X damage to each creature with flying, which I will say we do not have a lot of flying protection, so we might use that side more often than not. But if we don't, we can pay X and grab X amount of land cards. Just period land cards from our deck and put them into our hand. So if we've got all of our mana out and we can pay 10 into X and then Lightning Storm, we immediately have 23 damage on a Lightning Storm. We've got such versatility with Nylea's Intervention, and also such a great finisher with it. Our last two, I'm going to start off with Overwhelm, just because it's very simple. We get to convoke a 7-mana spell that gives all of our creatures +3/+3 until end of turn. That's it. No trample, no extra pizzazz. It is just 3/3 across your board. You can tap the plant tokens that Phylath brings in. You can tap the Zendikar Royal tokens. That is it. We can just pay double green for this because of that convoke ability on it. But the main piece here that I wanted to get to is Creeping Renaissance. Creeping Renaissance is a 3 and double green for choose a permanent type. Return all cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to your hand with a flashback of 7. So, worst comes to worst, we've discarded our hand. We don't have anything else. You know, we don't have Nylea's Intervention in hand. We don't have Sprouting Vines. We just, you know, spent all of our lands pumping into Borborygmos and Rage. We can pay 5 mana, get all of those back, pump more damage out with Borborygmos. So that's our game plan with the $50 deck. We are really banking on discarding our lands and dealing damage where we can, as well as just kind of swinging for the fences. Now, we're not going to spend as much time with it, but let's get into our $400 deck list. This deck list, if we are looking at TCG Player, is sitting at about $376 without basic lands, $380 with basic lands. We're not going to really go into this deep because there's going to be a lot of the same beats. But some of the things that I will note is if we look at our creatures, we do have some more important things. So we've got things like Azusa, Random Map Excavator, Scoot Swarm, things that are going to get us more landfall triggers and benefit more off of those landfall triggers. We have the Teamer Omnath, which allows us to draw, lets us deal damage equal to the number of elementals we control, which again, we are incidentally making a lot of elementals still. And if we control 8 or more lands, we're going to be drawing cards with him as well. We have Sulfim and Toralf, which are going to make it so we're dealing double damage, and we are dealing trample extra damage. So, okay, we're going to deal double our 2 that we've already done. So let's say we're discarding 3 lands to Borborygmos, dealing 6 damage. We're going to deal 12 instead. And then whatever doesn't get dealt to that creature is going to their face and then doubling again. We do also have some things like Tatyova just for that extra draw power, Titania for when our lands do get destroyed or when we are sacrificing our own lands, and Morog. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, we get additional combat phases. Again, just a bunch of really good things. Looking at our artifacts, we did remove a lot of our signets because we put in a Swiftfoot Boots for more protection for some of our more important pieces, a Arcane Signet just for a little bit faster direct mana instead of the other signets, and Thought Vessel. We have Thought Vessel and Reliquary Tower in here so we can have a infinitely big hand size. Now, enchantments, we did put in Teamer Ascendancy and Rhythm of the Wild. A, for so we cannot have our creature spells countered. For B, it's a haste enabler. On both of these, they give all of our creatures haste. With that being said, we do have a secondary play here, which we will go over in just a second. But we've got Prismatic Omen, so our Koth emblem will always be triggering because it makes all of our lands every basic land type. We have City on Fire, which triples our damage. And we have a Repercussion in here. Repercussion, unfortunately, couldn't make the deck list for the $50, but it's going to be huge for this one. Because Repercussion says, whenever a creature is dealt damage, Repercussion deals that much damage to the creature's controller. So if we deal damage in a large quantity to a target creature, that creature is going to trample itself into its owner. So we deal 6 damage to a creature, we don't have Toralf, the owner's still taking 6 damage. We are going to be dealing so much damage with Borborygmos in this game plan that it is going to be absurd. Going back into our lands being changed a little bit, we did put in a Sunder, because Sunder returns all lands to the owner's hands. We play Reliquary Tower, we've got Thought Vessel out, we have an infinite hand size. We don't have to worry about discarding at the end of turn. We can either start playing them, getting the real Valakut or Koth Valakut triggers off, or at instant speed we can pitch them all to Borborygmos and deal all of this in damage. Looking at our lands themselves, we do have Izzet Boilerworks and Gruul Turf, so we can get multiple land drops, so we can bounce things, replay them. We have a snow-covered forest, island, and mountain. We have our shocks. The reason we put in these snow-covereds is because we want to be able to utilize Field of the Dead. That's going to get us residual creatures as we go through. So every time that we play a land, as long as we've got 7 or more lands with different names, we get a 2/2. So if we play a Gruul Turf, bounce an island, and then replay that island, and we're at 7 at both instances of that, we're going to make two 2/2s. And Keswick Wolfrun, just for a good finisher. X, red, green, tap, target creature gets XO and trample until end of turn. Looking at our Planeswalkers, we added Wrenn and 7, so we can return all permanent cards from our graveyard to our hand if we really need to, but we get to -3 to get a creature with power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control, 0 to put all lands that we control onto the battlefield. If we've got Morog out, that is going to be an instant game finisher. And +1, we look at the top 4, get lands. And then we've got Luca. Luca's just kind of a good card in our situation. Potentially 4-cost Planeswalker if we don't want to pay that Phyrexian or red-green. That +1, we can pay a red and a green. We get a red and a green, and we can cast creature spells with that. We can neg 1 to get a 3/3 with Toxic 1 if we really wanted to just kind of go on the swing wide plan and start making tokens. Or we can neg 4, which deals X damage divided as we choose based on the biggest creature we control. Which, with what we've got here, such as Cultivator Colossus, we can deal a lot of damage. Instants and sorceries, kind of the same old. A bunch of lands, matter stuff. We did put in a Constant Miss because we had that capability. Constant Miss allows us to sacrifice a land and fog. So we can pay 2, sacrifice a land, keep this card in our hand, and creatures deal no combat damage this turn. Perfect. And since we did have the $400 deck range here, we did add a second gameplay we could do here. So we can take out all of our instants and all of our sorceries and put in the cards that we have in our sideboard here, which you're going to notice all of these are permanents. Why would we put a bunch of permanents in here, though? Why would we want no instants and sorceries in our deck? Our 10-cost card is why. Because, coincidentally, Borborygmos and Fblthp does make a very, very compelling Primal Surge deck. He is in Teamer, so he does give us some very good draw power, very good ramp, and it allows us to Primal Surge pretty freely if we get there. And if we have all of these cards, with Primal Surge, we get to play our entire deck, say no to all Teamer Ascendancy draw spells. We would have to leave a couple due to Omnath. But we could flip 90% of our deck, and with haste, swing in and kill somebody. Because not only are we having all of these creatures on the battlefield, potentially, but we're getting things like Liege of the Tangle, Itali, Waking the Trolls, Ancient Green Warden, Zendikar's Royal, Vornaclex, Green Sleeves, Cavalier of Flames. We have so many things that come off of this Primal Surge that just end the game. So, I hope you enjoyed our walkthrough of these decks, as well as that additional gameplay loop that we can go into. Both of these deck lists will be in the description down below, as well as a link to our affiliate, w.gg, which, if you use the code LICH, all capital, at checkout, you'll get 10% off of your order. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell us what you liked in the comments, and we'll see you next time.